Israel destroys the Iranian heavy water reactor in Iraq. Iran hits a hospital in Israel, and Trump had already signed off on attacking Iran on Tuesday, but he decided to wait whether they are going to give up their nuclear program. All of this while Iran now finally achieves its first victory against a Israeli plane, or in this case, a drone. But all of this and more in this SITREP. Israel says they have destroyed now half of the Iranian TEL, so transporter erector launcher for ballistic missiles. They also say they now destroyed 35 to 40% of all the missiles that Iran had prior to the war. They also struck a missile depot in Isfahan. They hit the Tehrani Moghadam missile base in Tehran. They hit the Amant missile base in Tabriz. That's where Gadir missiles are being stored. They hit missile factories as well as a factory for missile fuel. They also hit the IRGC facility close to Tehran where missiles are being stored, and again they hit Parchin close to Tehran where the missile complex is, where research, production and storage of missiles is happening, and probably for nuclear weapons as well. In regards to military targets, they hit the Isfahan Air Force Base where F-14 are being stored as well as or stationed, as well as F-7. F-7 is, just to explain, that's the export version of the J-7, which is the Chinese copy of the MiG-21. So the Iranian, basically MiG-21s are stationed there. The IRGC Shahid Karnazi barracks in Isfahan were also hit. They also hit the IRGC headquarters in Khomein. They hit the Basij headquarter in Isfahan. Basij are a militia, a loyal militia that is being used, among other things, to put down rebellions, uprisings, etc. They hit the Nabi Akram base of the IRGC, and they also struck numerous AH-1 Cobra attack helicopters. Interestingly enough, they said they were meant to attack planes of the Israelis in the sky. Now, this sounds a little weird or ridiculous. A Cobra against planes, maybe, I guess they can shoot down some unarmed, slow drones. But if a Cobra tries to fight an Israeli F-16, the most likely outcome is another kill mark on the side of the Israeli plane. So not sure about this, but we see that this is part of a campaign to reduce the Iranian military capability in general. Among those, we see attacks on infrastructure as well, on military defense infrastructure. For instance, the Hesa aircraft factory at Isfahan was attacked. It is also involved in drone production. They also attacked the factory for the production of anti-tank guided weapons. They say they were meant for Hezbollah, but obviously probably not just for Hezbollah. So they attack production facilities for ATGMs as well. And they attacked the Persian Research Center in Sanyan. It is basically a metallurgical factory for special metals. The explanations are that metals being produced there are also being used for centrifuges of the nuclear program, but they can also be used to produce turbines for airplanes, etc. So a wide variety of special metals is being produced there. Let's switch to the nuclear program. And here the International Atomic Energy Agency has said Israel's attacks against Natanz did hit it directly. They also said that a factory for centrifuges was hit, as well as the Tehran Nuclear Research Center, which is testing and producing centrifuges engines. The TNRC, the Tehran Nuclear Research Center, is likely also involved in separation of plutonium, urane conversion, laser enrichment, as well as polonium production. All of this being used, the TNRC. They also attacked the Imam Hussein University, which is controlled by the IRGC and where research for nuclear weapons was done. They also struck the Air Force nuclear the air defense sites around the Fordo nuclear facility. This is clearly, in my mind, a shaping of the area there to increase their own options, while they can't really do much against Fordo except maybe closing the gates with bombs, which then can be redug at a later point. If they want to keep their options open, they need at some point get rid of the air defense there, and that was done, or that is in the process right now as well. But they also hit the nuclear reactor here in Iraq. They hit the heavy water reactor. We see it here. The main building of it was hit. The Israelis explained it in a video that it was used for the production, or it was meant to produce nuclear weapons. It's unclear to me. I researched it a little, and heavy water reactors are generally considered to be not ideal to produce nuclear weapons, but the Indians have done it with a heavy water reactor, so it was proven in the past that it was possible. Whether this version of it is ideal for it or not is unclear. The reactor itself was not in usage yet, and we see the main building was hit. We see the clear penetration. The Iranians themselves have already said that there is no spillage of any nuclear particles, so radioactivity has not increased. Clearly, the reactor was not filled yet, and the Israelis before warned the civilians to evacuate the area around the facility. The Iranians strike as well. They have achieved their first shootdown, their first confirmed one. As you all know, the Iranians claimed they have shot down 530 F-35s already, but this time they act without proving anything. Sorry, I had to break off because my cat was vandalizing something here and he starts again. I hope it's not too audible. This is the shootdown of them where they managed to... I'm deeply sorry, he was vandalizing a cardboard, so I lost the script for a moment. This was a shootdown they actually achieved. They told they had already shot down 5 F-35s and brought pictures where the plane was 10 times as big as it actually is, where basically every proof they delivered was clear AI. Now, of course, they actually managed to shoot something down, a Hermes 900 drones close to Isfahan. This is already confirmed by Israel. They say it's not a big deal. They won't have any benefit from this. But this is the actual first shoot down of something over Iran that is confirmed. The Iranians by now have at least launched 14 waves of ballistic missiles against Iran. The numbers of those missiles are usually 20 or lower now. Of those lower waves, several times they were already completely intercepted, where the Iranians didn't manage to get a single one through, and the Israelis saying that now the missiles are being started from central Iran because the IDF is dominating western Iran too much. The bigger distance obviously means that the accuracy is likely lower, as it's a longer time for the internal navigation system to increase errors, and at the same time several of the classes that they've used so far, of the missile classes, can't no longer be used. That's the Hajj Qasem, the Fatah, and the Khaibar Shekan. But at the same time, it seems unlikely that this is too big of a deal, because Isfahan, while those can't shoot from Isfahan anymore and the Iranians now have to use different missiles, it's more likely that they're using missiles that are already in place. It doesn't make sense for a military that is aiming mostly towards Israel with its medium-range missiles to station missiles that can reach Israel from the western part of the country, to station it anywhere else but in the western country. So that now they launch from the center of the country is more likely that they switch to different classes, and that either the ones on the western part are already expended, or that they are too suppressed to use them anymore. To switch around, to use missiles that are stationed, that are stored in western Iran, and transport them to central Iran would probably be pretty much madness with the air dominance of the Israelis, as they can be caught en route. It would be much smarter than to try to get out of the underground storage facility, launch, and get the TEL back into safety immediately. That would probably be much more likely than moving. So from my understanding, it doesn't make too much sense that they move the missiles now to central Iran, while at the same time we have visual evidence of the Israelis destroying TELs of the Iranians when they catch them. So it's more likely that they simply use now different storages of their missiles for those attacks. Then among those attacks, they likely used cluster munitions. The Israelis are currently talking about it, and there are visual signs of this, that the missiles that were used in the recent attacks had several warheads that were separating and spreading around like cluster munition. And we have visual evidence of this in the past. The Iranians showed it. You can see the Iranian flag here. They showed that they have these warheads with submunitions for their missiles, and now they might have been used against Israeli cities. And as we're talking about cities, the hospital, the Soroka hospital in Beersheba, was hit. As far as I know, it's unclear yet whether it was a fragment or a full missile. Theoretically, it could be one of the submunitions as well. From what I've seen, I was not able to confirm it yet, but supposedly the IRGC is saying they hit the hospital because it was used for meetings of high-ranking officials of the Israelis. So basically, they are using the explanation the Israelis are using when they strike a hospital in Gaza, where they usually say it's being used by Hamas leadership. That's why we struck the hospital. And the Iranian TV was spreading around a computer-generated graphics according to which weapons were stored under that hospital. It's clearly also a reference to Israeli claims about hospitals in Gaza. As of now, I do not see that there's a certainty whether that hospital was hit on purpose. I talked to some experts this morning, and they say the likelihood that the accuracy of the missiles is high enough is pretty low. So likely it was a coincidence that the hospital was hit. By now, we have almost certainty. I came to that conclusion days ago that Iran has switched to simply bombarding cities, to no longer aim at military targets like they did in the first two attacks in the past year. Now they're aiming at targets, and that's already a war crime. So whether or not they aimed for a hospital or just in a city doesn't make much of a difference, as we've seen in Tel Aviv, where a lot of civilian areas, a lot of residential areas suffered big damages after hits. So if we already know they commit war crimes, there's no need to invent new ones. There are easy ways to find out, or there are some ways to find out whether that was an aimed attack. First of all, once the missile is once the missile is identified, if we find out if it's identified with a high certainty, then we can see what the past experiences are for the accuracy. The Iranians are very likely lying when it comes to the accuracy, simply for propaganda purpose. It makes a missile, their deterrence is much higher when they claim that their missiles have a CEP, an accuracy where 50% hits in a circle of 20 meters. So out of 100 missiles, 50 would hit in a circle of just 20 meters, makes those missiles extremely dangerous. And there's a high incentive for the Iranians to simply claim that their missiles have this accuracy and that it's capable of hitting it, while the reality might be far away from this. We've seen that in the past with the Russians too, to a certain degree, whereas on the West, it's usually rather understated, as you want to keep your actual abilities secret to a certain degree. But while we don't know, so while we can't use the Iranian numbers, and you might find some on Wikipedia that claim a CEP of this and this meters, we would need accurate analysis of attacks. And there comes the next problem. If an airbase, for instance, is attacked, we don't know what was aimed at. Was it the runway? Was it the hangars? Was it the barracks? Was it the ammunition storage? Those buildings might be hundreds of meters away. So if you have a cluster of hits between buildings, you don't know whether those were just accidents because they aimed at the whole base, or whether these individual buildings were aimed at it. So that will be somewhat hard to identify if that was a missile that's actually accurate enough. So it was likely that it was aimed at a hospital. And the second one is much easier if they continue striking hospitals. Now, if in the next 3 days we have 3 more strikes against hospitals, then we know for sure that this was on purpose. But as they have started shelling or shooting at cities itself, at concentration or in housing concentrations of residential areas, it's simply a matter of time until a hospital is being hit as well. And I do not have any serious doubt that the Iranians are shelling cities and not specifically military targets. In those cities, we've seen enough proof of this that residential areas have taken damage. So from my point of view, there's no need to invent something. There's no need to lie. it's already a war crime if they shoot at cities. So why would we need to argue whether or not the hospital was aimed at on purpose? I usually say that it's actually counterproductive to invent something if you talk about something that needs criticism, because it weakens your position, because the opposing side can just prove that you lied in this point and the rest of your argument is more or less moot. And this should be handled with Trump. This should be handled with the Ukraine war. This should be handled with Israeli-Iranian war. In each case, there are enough things that can be criticized legitimately, and there's simply no need to invent something new. If someone feels the need to invent something to criticize, then probably his own position is kind of weak. But we move to the drone attacks. Here have been numerous additional drone attacks by the Iranians, and by now the Israelis say over 1,000 drones were started against Israel, and so far not a single hit is confirmed, but almost 200 made it into Israel, which would say that 80% is intercepted on the way, but at least 20% made it through after all. Then we have the defense minister of Israel confirming that the destruction of the headquarters of the security forces was aimed especially to take a central repressive arm of the regime away, so to weaken the regime itself. He also said we are going to continue striking the regime itself, and this is in the context of what I said in the past, that the Israelis aim for a regime change by weakening the regime itself. If you paid attention to the part where I said the military targets, you will have heard IRGC, IRGC, IRGC. The Revolutionary Guards seem to be the main focus of attacks. If it's not about missiles, if it's not about the nuclear program, and if it's not about the Air Force and air defense, it seems to be mostly focused at the IRGC and at the Basij, which are supporting militia of the regime as well. And the best way to allow for the regime to be overthrown is obviously to weaken the forces that will play the main role in putting down any rebellion, and to weaken the regime's ability to respond, whether it's due to the destruction of ministries, of headquarters, or maybe even the TV that might have been in that context as well, the TV station that was attacked. And in Iran, internet is now mostly down. Now it's unclear why. It's likely that this is to avoid a coordination of the opposition. Theoretically, it could be cyber attacks as well, but that doesn't make too much sense anymore. So likely Iran has shut down the internet now to prevent the opposition from coordinating. And this makes sense as hacker groups have started sabotaging the country. They sabotaged banks where, for instance, ATMs did no longer work. And yesterday, a group hacked into the national television, which was then showing videos asking the people to go on the street to rise up against the regime. Obviously, taking away the people's ability to coordinate among each other would make a lot of sense in this context. And the Iranian Parliament is tightening the punishments for working with enemy governments. Working with enemy governments is widely broadened now. Now sending videos or pictures to foreign media that undermine the morale in Iran is already a punishable crime. So if you take a picture of some military target being destroyed, that could probably already send you to prison and give you a harsh punishment once that law is fully in place. And the government is still being challenged. Now the exiled crown prince calls up for the Iranians to rise up. Supposedly he has a lot of support in the opposition abroad as well as in the country, but in the end we'll have to see how much of that is propaganda or how much of this is true. But he called the population to rise up, and he called the military and the security services to side with the population against the regime. In the political sphere, we have Donald Trump already approved an Iran attack plan on Tuesday. And as you remember, I made a video on Monday that I said everything points to the US getting involved. So I read the signs correctly in this case, but he then decided to hold off. He decided to hold off to see whether they will accept to give up their nuclear program. This is obviously highly unlikely that the Iranians are going to do that, as we've said in the past. And Trump has emphasized that he wants total victory now. He is not going to go for a ceasefire. The nuclear program has to end. That's what he's saying right now. And at least according to surveys, he has 80% of the population with him in this regard in the US. 80% are in favor of preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Then he said he might strike or he might not, and he basically said he's out of patience with the Iranians. He is now publicly contemplating joining the war, and the Iranians, though, have completely declined the request for total capitulation. They said there is not going to be an unconditional surrender, which also means that they won't be giving up their nuclear program. They could say that at the same time. So Trump's precondition to not intervene is likely not going to be met. And right now, there were discussions in the US to meet the Iranian foreign minister. Potentially Steve Witkoff is going to be sent, and Iran has already said they are willing to meet with Witkoff or even with JD Vance, which shows a willingness to move. But then again, supposedly Trump doesn't even want too much of negotiation because he wants the nuclear program to end, and Iran could simply say, okay, we are willing to end it, and Trump would probably immediately start pressuring Israel to stop the attacks on Iran. But as of now, that seems unlikely. And while a US intervention remains high, we see that the preparations for that have happened. Not only did they send the tanker planes, which are obviously the means to support military operations, but we also have F-16, F-22, and F-35 being sent. The US also removed all of the planes that were visible on satellite pictures from the Al Udeid airbase in Qatar. We see them here. And here we see the planes, and at a later point, those planes have disappeared, as well as those that were here. You also see them here, and they're all gone. So every plane that was out in the open is gone. There might be some in hardened aircraft shelters, but the rest is gone. And obviously, Qatar is close enough to Iran that even long-range rocket artillery might reach there. Drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, every kind of weaponry Iran has can reach it. And the warning time is very low, especially with something even high supersonic, in the high sonic range or supersonic range. It's minutes where they can hit, so far too short for those planes to rise up once they're being attacked, and far too short to have enough own fighter jets rise up to meet even just drone attacks. And this is why they evacuated, and it clearly shows that the US are expecting an outbreak of hostilities as a high likelihood. Also from Bahrain, they evacuated the US ships in the harbor there for the same reason, close to Iran, and Iran knows where they are, so they would be vulnerable. The US also sent a third aircraft carrier. I said in the past that they sent the Nimitz class, the Nimitz, USS Nimitz, from Southeast Asia to the theater, and now the confirmation is there that the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group is going to be deployed to Europe, and thus potentially in range. It's only going to be there in probably 2 to 3 weeks, but from the Western Mediterranean it could get engaged in a fighting war against Iran as well. So far I do not see that it's certain that it's going to be in the Mediterranean, but it seems highly likely. And there then again, of course, those planes from the carrier could operate simply because there's a plethora of refueling planes now available to refuel them on their way to Iran if needed. Then Iran is also getting some support. Katib Hezbollah, Katib Sayyid al-Shuhada, Harakat Hezbollah al-Nujaba, and the Ansar Allah al-Afia have all said all Shiite militias from Iraq have agreed to work together against the US, to strike the US forces if the US is going to strike Iran. So at least some proxy forces have openly declared they're going to join in. But it's not all, because apparently China has sent something to Iran. 3 planes, 3 Boeing 747 have started in China and have flown over Kazakhstan and then Turkmenistan. Their flight plan has been to fly to Luxembourg, but they disappeared over Iran and never arrived in Luxembourg. Now, it's pure speculation what could be on there. and all of this happened after the war has started, after this phase of the war has started. Now, they could have brought surface-to-air missiles. Iran is using the HK-2 system and has built the Sayat-1 system that is basically based on it and can probably use the same missiles. Theoretically, also HQ-7, even though I'm not sure it can actually reach the altitudes where the Israelis operate, but the HQ-2 can. But theoretically, it could also be cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles. Theoretically, I'm not sure if radar systems can be disassembled small enough to fit in those transport planes, but that could have been an option as well. Generally, it's completely unknown what it was, but it's likely, obviously, something to support Iran in its current conflict. We have to see that something new, completely new, is unlikely, as without training, the use for Iran will be fairly limited. So whatever it is, it can't be something too wild, at least not something where Iran doesn't already have experience with. But we see that while Russia has basically said Iran is on its own, we don't have a military alliance, so good luck to them, China seems to get involved and thus aiming to take the place of the Russians in Iran right now. At least that's how it looks right now. So to come to a conclusion, Israel is considering a ground assault on Fordo. That is being published now. If the US are not going to get involved. So theoretically, they have the capabilities to it. They have the C-130 with refueling capabilities to have their CH-53 helicopters refueled on the way to then land special forces. Then they have to enter a facility 300 kilometers deep in Iran, fight their way in, probably without having full plans about every defensive potential. All of this while it has been publicly discussed and thus allowing the Iranians time to prepare. It's hard to overstate the risk that this operation would involve, but the Israelis are at least capable of doing that regarding to in the past. But a U.S. intervention is still I still have to consider a U.S. intervention most likely. Much more likely than not if Iran doesn't give in. Iran says they want to negotiate, but they clearly do not want to give up their nuclear program. Otherwise, they would simply say so and stop the bombing. So the question will be, what is Trump going to do? Is he going to falter if he's going to get something so he can declare I won everything? Or is he actually going to go through with what he claimed now all the time in the past few days, that a nuclear bomb will be unacceptable and that he will only accept a complete capitulation in regards to the nuclear program? We'll have to see whether or not what Trump is going to do here, because that the Iranians will agree to hand over everything and watch everything being dismantled while accepting to international controls to make sure they're not rebuilding in secret seems at least highly unlikely, at least of now. If it happens, a massive escalation is to be expected. Iran has already threatened it, and if they don't give in, they know what they're going into, so they're not going to just take it while being pummeled. Iran has probably thousands of short-range ballistic missiles that can reach over the Gulf, that can hit US bases, and if the Gulf states get involved because of this, then they can hit the oil and gas infrastructure there as well. They already threatened that they're going to attack the US bases in the Gulf states. They might also try to close the Strait of Hormuz. To which degree this is going to be successful or not is obviously unclear, but a massive escalation there is likely in case Trump gets involved. We'll have to see how that continues. And if you don't want to miss that, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. If you like this SITREP, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm, and leave a comment if you have something to add. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description, but that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.